Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dan Finn with Finn Financial Group, and for the past 30 plus years, I've been helping clients meet their long-term fixed income security needs using structured settlements and related products and services. Most people involved in personal injury litigation know what structured settlements are. For those who don't, structured settlements permit litigants to resolve their differences by providing agreed, guaranteed, tax-advantaged future income to an injured party instead of a single lump sum. But what happens when a client's situation changes down the road when the original terms of the structure may no longer properly address those needs? That's where factoring comes into play. Factoring is the common term used for an industry that exists to buy and sell aftermarket structured settlement contracts. Now, if you read our firm's recent newsletter, you're probably left with a less than enthusiastic view of the factoring industry. That's not an uncommon view to those of us in the structured settlement business. Likewise, it's not an uncommon view with claims professionals and plaintiff attorneys who work hard to facilitate settlements they deeply believe in their value. But there exists a far less cynical view of this industry, and our next guest is here to help us with that. Mears of Bentzen FInancial and based in New York City is a CPA and currently works as a post-settlement annuity consultant. Full disclosure here, Cam and I have known each other for the better part of 20 years when he worked in his former capacity, promoting structured settlements for a major casualty insurance company. We also served together on committees for the National Structured Settlements Trade Association. It is because of this relationship that I'm comfortable giving him this forum today to share his views on this very important topic. Cam, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Great. I want to begin by mentioning the newspaper article which prompted me to want to delve into this topic today in the first place. Last month, the Minnesota Star Tribune did an expose on factoring transactions in the state. And that four-part series left readers with an overall very unfavorable view of the industry. Were they fair in their coverage, and any comments you have on what you read there?
Sure. I read the series. I thought it was great that the Star took the time to look into this. There was also a series of articles written in the Washington Post a few years ago. And I think that from my perspective, just to give you a little bit of history, my partner Rhonda Benson and I come from the structured settlement industry, i.e. we were people putting these together. And we both decided to come into the factoring industry for the simple reason that we felt that factoring is not a negative, but in the right situations, it can be a value. It can be actually a value add to a structured settlement. And what I mean by that is that when a structured settlement is put in place, you don't know what the future holds. And the attorneys and structured settlement consultants do their best to secure an individual's future. But when unanticipated things happen down the road, it's good to have the ability to address those financial needs. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. And what?
And so what I think, to get back to the article, was important is that the distinction that between what we do and what the companies that they describe, or the behavior that they describe in those articles, is very simple. In order for factoring to be a value add, I believe that the individuals who put the structure together should be involved. In other words, if you're receiving structured settlement payments and you've had a change in your situation, or for whatever reason you think that it might make sense to get some of the cash early, it makes sense to go back to where you can get good advice. That stands in stark contrast to what they describe, which is factoring companies themselves getting in touch with people with structured settlements and either calling them up or putting out advertisements to motivate them to call them and then working out transactions to buy their payments. I think there's a fundamental difference.
Yeah, and I think, to your credit, you were directly responsible for bringing me full circle on this. I mean, I did a 180 after, because I knew you took the time to explain some situations where factoring could be beneficial, and it caused me to stop and think. And I think that approach probably makes a lot of sense. From my perspective, and I hear this from attorneys that I talk with and claims associates, what seems to be so offensive is the suggestion that a company needs to buy structured settlements because you were put into something that was terrible to begin with. And therefore, we're going to help you by relieving you of the burden of having a structured settlements, when in fact, the factoring companies hope to buy that for a lot of them for as good as a deal as they can, so they can sell it and make more money on it. It's not as magnanimous as they'd like you to believe. So I think your take on this is significant. You come from a structured settlement background. You know the value of these things, and we've talked about this. There are times when you try to talk people out of structuring it. You help them make sure they've exhausted other, maybe more cost-effective options before they factor. So how I guess that leads me to the question just you started talking about a little bit, but how are you different? How is your approach different than maybe some of your peers or your competitors?
Right. Well, the fundamental difference is that we work on referral only. So we see ourselves as consultants, and we see ourselves as somebody who can work hand in hand, or at least on a hand-off basis, with the consultants or the attorneys. When I was training claims adjusters, one of the slides we had was what are the benefits, or I'm sorry, what are the drawbacks of structured settlements? And we used to laugh because there was only one drawback of a structured settlement, and that was that you can't change it. And factoring, when I say it's a value add, it addresses that shortcoming of not being able to change it. So if you had a perfect view into the future, you could put a structured settlement in place and rest assured that it was going to satisfy all the needs. And I think they do most of the time, the vast majority of the time. But in those situations where they don't, factoring provides the ability to get liquidity to cover needs.
And for our viewers, that stipulation is in place because of the original tax code that says when you put a structured settlement together, you cannot accelerate the benefits, is why it exists in the first place. And the factoring industry arose to find a way basically to make that work. And I, again, have come full circle on this. I don't disagree with you. You've shown me, and I think before I get distracted further, I want to make sure that you take an opportunity. Can you share with our viewers a situation where you helped somebody that might have been better served by factoring instead of keeping the existing terms of their structured settlement in place?
Right. I'll give you a couple of general examples because they happen. You see similar things over and over again. One situation, there was a young woman with a structured settlement that was paying her a monthly income. It was a result of a class action lawsuit relating to something that had happened at birth, a medication. And now, 20 years later, she needed money for a heart operation that wasn't covered by insurance. So quite simply, we were able to purchase a portion of her payments and get her the cash that she needed for that operation. Another situation, there was an elderly couple in their 70s. Maybe that's not elderly anymore. But their son, unfortunately, had passed away. It was his structure. And the payments stretched out for about 30 years. So for them, it was more appropriate to have the money now than to wait 30 years. Hopefully they'll still be around in 30 years, but it was the idea was to give them the benefit of that money now. And then also in general, I've worked with a number of special needs trusts where a structured settlement is paying into the trust. The trust has been set up with all the planning in the world, but things have changed a little bit. and the trustee is needed to liquidate a little bit sooner some of the structure payments in order to have more money in the trust for current needs.
So I think post-settlement consultant is a perfect title for you. You're not just a buyer of annuities, and you don't just buy and sell annuities. You're actually consulting with people to see how you can better meet their needs to address situations and shortcomings that the structured settlements might have.
Right. That's the idea. And just to go back to what makes us different, when you advertise or when you call people, some companies, so some practices are to go through court records. I've certainly had my share of structured settlement consultants call me because their clients have been contacted by other factoring companies on the basis of what they found in court records from their original settlements. We want people in our perfect world. We would like structured settlement recipients, when and if they ever need cash faster than the structure is paying, we would like them to go back to their structured settlement consultant and their attorney, at the very least, just to ask them what makes sense. Because these transactions are a little bit more complicated than the average person might realize. And once we get the handoff, just to skip to another part of what we do, we fully explain to them what they're doing. For example, you're not selling your annuity, you're selling the right to receive future payments. As you pointed out, the tax code is such that the payments have to be fixed and determinable. The life company will never change the payment schedule. So what a factoring company is doing is legally purchasing the right to get those payments in the future. And in doing so, you're basically borrowing money. You're paying an interest rate. You're paying money to get money. So you do the same thing if you were taking a bank loan. You would pay interest over a certain period of time. Same thing with these payment rights. And we want to explain to people that you're not just getting $50,000 in your pocket because you've sold structure payments, but instead that you are paying interest to get money in the future. And a lot of times it makes sense. A lot of times it's cheaper. It remains tax-free, so on and so forth. But the point is, we want people to understand that. We also want to put, to dispel the notion that you're getting cents on the dollar. Cents on the dollar is applicable to receivables factoring, where if somebody has a $10,000 account receivable and they sell it to a collection company for $5,000, they're selling it for 50 cents on the dollar. With us, it's plain and simple time value of money. The only reason it appears to be cents on the dollar is because you're paying interest to get it. And again, it's just very important for people to understand that, to understand the fact that you can't put it back into the structure, so on and so forth. The bottom line is, we want people to do these if it makes sense and with their eyes fully open.
Cam, you mentioned that some of the things that some in the factoring industry engage in, we should point out, there's nothing illegal about anything they're doing. This factoring laws, structured settlement protections acts exists in all 50 states. So there's no questions everything's legal. But if you had a magic wand, what changes might you make to some of those laws? If you could create it for every state in the union, to change the factoring laws, what would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I'll tell you the simplest thing. I would make all of the structured settlement agreements and everything that's in the courts confidential. I would want to keep people, again, I'm not going to say anything bad about anybody, but I don't think it's the right thing for companies to contact people out of the blue and offer them money for their structured settlements. I think advertising, I won't address that right now. We don't advertise. And I think in a perfect world, anybody who has a structured settlement would know that they can go back to their structured settlement consultant or attorney and ask for advice. I think that you never know what situation warrants it. The structured settlement consultant knows the situation to begin with and could be a good first person to bounce things off of, can give people advice. For my part, if that consultant put the client in touch with me, I would give them all the background information and explanations that I just described. I think all of that lends itself to making factoring a financial transaction that people enter into with their eyes wide open, knowing all of the implications. And I think that's probably the most important thing.
Any final thoughts or suggestions on what anybody can do if they want to learn more about this particular topic, Cam?
Well, I think, for my part, as I said, I work, Rhonda and I work on referral only. So anybody who's, who has this kind of need should consult with their attorney or their structure broker. They can also find information on our firm at bensonfinancial.com. It's BENTZEN financial.com. In terms of technical information, that sort of thing, I'm always happy to, to help people understand those things.
Well, very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate your opening our eyes on this. The audience does too, I'm sure. And I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with us, Cam. All the best to you going forward, and I hope to see you and talk to you again very soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks very much. Hope to check in with you on the next webinar we do. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.